Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm excited to share with you a really fun card featuring Spellbinders Tunnel Scapes collection. I have two words to describe these products: fabulous and unique. This card features two die sets, Underwater Tunnel and Underwater Marine Life. This tunnel card is actually surprisingly quite easy to pull together. I did have to spend a little bit of time playing around with the overall dimensions of the panel in which we'll be creating the concertina fold. To create an A2 size card, we'll start off with a panel that is 10¼ inches wide and 5½ inches tall. Working in the central part of the panel, I'm just going to apply some inks randomly. I'm working with Distress Oxides and applying Mermaid Lagoon, Salvage Patina, and Peacock Feathers. And when I'm finished adding in the color, then I'm going to go in with some white pigment ink, and in all the areas where the cardstock is peeking through, I'll apply it. Using a clean blending brush, I'll go over the entire panel, blending all of the colors together. This card is going to have two panels that fit into the concertina folds. I've cut these panels to 5½ inches tall and 4 inches wide. Because the concertina folds are a ½ inch deep, there is a little bit of wiggle room with the width of these panels. I chose to make mine 4 inches. You probably don't want to go any smaller than that. And you can take it right up to just under 4¼ inches. Don't make it a full 4¼ inches wide, because when the panel is pressed down into its flat position to go into the envelope, these panels will not lay flat. The same colors and inking technique used on the large panel is applied to these small panels. These are put together. They are going to form a watery underwater tunnel. It is quite cool. To create some soft and pretty texture, I'll pick up some clean water with a fan brush and then tap it on. I like to let it sit for about 10 seconds or so before picking up the moisture with a paper towel. This technique never gets old. I just love it. On either end of the large panel, we'll create the concertina fold, or the zigzag fold, the accordion fold. There's probably another name out there, but I'm not sure what it might be. 4 lines will be created every ½ inch right up to the 3-inch mark. Then the panel is flipped around and it's scored again at a ½ inch, 1 inch, 1½ inches, 2 inches, 2½ inches, and then finally 3 inches. Before we do the folds, we'll first do some die cutting using the dies found in the Underwater Tunnel die set. Although these dies have irregular shapes, they do graduate in size. We'll use the largest one to die cut the largest panel. The medium size and small die will be used to cut the other 2 panels that will be inserted into the concertina folds. Look how cool they look when they're layered up. Really wanted to have the elements suspended in these tunnels. I didn't want to be working with a whole bunch of acetate strips, so I thought, why not just cover the whole window with acetate? So aside from being able to place the elements anywhere I wanted to in this tunnel scape, there were a couple of other real bonuses. First, the acetate really does give it a watery look. It is so cool looking. Really, it feels like you're looking into one of those giant aquariums. The other bonus is that the scenes can be created before the tunnel card is constructed, so that really does make things a whole lot easier. And there's actually a third bonus, but I'm not going to talk about that until we start constructing the tunnel card. So in addition to the graduated tunnels, Underwater Tunnel die set comes with seaweed, rocks, and a really cool anchor. And as you can see, they'll be cut out of various colors of cardstock. To give these elements some depth and dimension, I'm going to use mini blending brushes and add in some color. I'm working with Distress Oxide inks. And on the gray anchor, you can see I'm adding in some salvage patina just on some of the edges. The anchor has a little die cut that layers on, and I've colored that completely with the salvage patina, and I'll go ahead and put it together. Use the same ink color to add some highlights to the dark teal seaweed. For the rest of the seaweed cut out of the mint cardstock, I'll add in some mowed lawn. The rocks have some really interesting texture on the die cuts. I'm going to highlight them with pigment white ink. There they are, all of the elements that are included in the underwater tunnel die set. Underwater marine life will help round out this scene. This is a layering die set made up of 3 different kinds of fish and a turtle. There's also this cute little wave detail in there. I have all my water animals layered together, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the previous set of elements and add some ink for some depth and dimension. To this little angelfish, I'm adding ripe persimmon at the bottom before I layer on that cute stripe detail. The stripe detail and a little fin are actually cut out of dark purple cardstock. That fin is not going to show up, so I'm going to add in just a little bit of pigment ink first. For the next fish, I'll add some white pigment ink to the top of the coral die cut to highlight it. For the base die cut, I'll add some ripe persimmon on the edges of the fins. And for the third fish, I'll just blend in some of that white pigment ink on the layering die cut. Depth is added to the turtle by simply adding a little bit of color to the shell and the detail of the legs. I'll be using at the very top of the shell pigment white ink, and then along the bottom and the edges of the detail of the legs, I'll add peacock feathers. Now back to the large panel with the scored lines, and we'll start making the concertina fold. The first crease next to the acetate window will be folded to the back of the card, and then the rest of the folds are simply folded first one way, then the other way to create an accordion. And then I'll do the very same thing on the other side of the card, with the first crease going towards the inside of the card, and then the subsequent creases going first to the outside, then to the inside, creating the concertina fold. There's a good view of the folds created on either side of the panel. And this is what it will look like when the 2 small panel inserts are in place. And it will go on to a very dark blue card base that will add a lot of depth to the tunnel. As I mentioned earlier, because the acetate is on all 3 windows, the elements can be suspended in the tunnel, and things can be built ahead of time and not trying to squeeze them in after the tunnel card has been put together. Right now the elements are just laid out. I wanted to add in some Nouveau drop detail, black for the eyes, and then a few little white spots here and there. It's wrapping up my crafting session for the day. So that was perfect, and that gave them an opportunity to dry overnight. The elements will be adhered with liquid adhesive. When possible, the adhesive is applied to those areas that will overlap the cardstock background. I want to avoid the possibility of smearing it on the acetate. Starting with the panel with the smallest tunnel that will sit right at the back of the tunnel card. As I add the elements, I periodically will lay the next panel over top to see how it's going to line up with the other elements. And the back panel is finished up with a white glitter cardstock wave. So on to the second panel, and I'll just lay that on top of the first panel that's sitting right at the back, and periodically I'll pull in the last panel with the concertina fold to see how things are lining up to one another. For this panel that is going to sit right in the middle, I'll have 2 fish plus the large seaweed sitting right at the bottom. And I've decided that there's some room on the back panel to squeeze in another wave detail. And then another one is added on the middle panel at the top. And then the final panel with the concertina folds is placed over top of the other 2 panels, and the final elements can be put in place. 2 different kinds of seaweed on that left-hand corner. I'm going to adhere the rocks together and put it at the base of those plants. I'll use my reverse tweezers to hold them in place until the glue is dry. On the other side of the window, the anchor will be nestled between 2 rock die cuts. One will be adhered to the front of the anchor, and then the other one will be tucked in behind. Now that the anchor is in place, it's time to pull this card together. A final pressing is given to the folds on either side before that first panel is put into position. I'll add the panel that is going to sit in the middle in that first valley. I'll be using liquid adhesive. That will give me a little bit of wiggle room as I get things lined up. And I find it easiest to do this with the main panel standing upright, slotting the panel in, and then closing it, laying it flat with reverse tweezers, holding everything in place until it dries. It doesn't take long for that glue to set up, so I use my hands as well. Awesome, now we're ready for the back panel. This one will slot into that second valley. Things looking good, so I'll pull it back out and add a thin line of liquid adhesive to either side of the panel. Again, slot it in and then reach for my reverse tweezers to hold everything in place until the glue dries. This is going to sit directly on that dark blue card base. You can't see a lot of it in the background, but I'm going to sneak in a couple of waves just to add a lot more depth to the overall scene. And as you can see, as the waves are added to the card base, I'll take my card front and put it on top just to make sure that I'm able to see the waves. I think this scene is built now, and so I'm going to add the adhesive to the 2 tabs on the back of the card front. Although these are thin streams of adhesive, you can see I'm being generous. This is an interactive card and it needs to be strong. And I make sure everything is lined up, and then I reach again for the reverse tweezers, close down those folds, and hold it in place until the glue is completely dry. There are some crafting tools that you definitely need more than one, and reverse tweezers fits into that category. And so here's the other bonus that I was talking about earlier that I said I would show you later. Because the acetate was added to the windows, it actually causes them to curve slightly. And yet when the folds are pushed down, the card lies perfectly flat. Obviously, this was by chance and not planned for, but boy, does it ever add a neat effect to this card. And the cute sentiment sitting on top of the seaweed is from the Bay Fair chipboard embellishment set. I'm totally in love with Spellbinders' Scapes collection. It is so unique and fabulous. I really like to have dimension in my cards, and this collection is well suited to that. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I loved making this card. As always, I appreciate your visit.